No church.
So, is there anybody online that has any questions that you want to ask?
Running myself in the coverage and I had a workshop like this. I have a
Okay.
instead of work.
No. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Well, I have a bit of a technical question. I don't know if anyone has an answer or not. It's very difficult to figure out, but the genetics of the life in this, on this world is made up of like 4 amino acids, you know, T, C, and G, and all the rest. And that code in the genetic framework allows an unbelievable variety of incredible creatures and you know, colors and shapes, and all this. Like, this world we live in is absolutely amazing based on the code that was created in order to form life. And I'm just wondering, there are only a certain number of amino acids. If you chose different amino acids and tried to get a code that would be as good, is there a different way of doing these 4 amino acids in order to make a better, you know, set of variety and beauty in the world? Or is this the best one that was chosen?
Well, I can tell you one thing. There's, first of all, there's 20 amino acids.
Yeah, but only 4 form the code.
Yeah, 4 for the code, but the
They're
code,
not amino acids, those are nucleotides. What you're referring to is 4, those aren't amino acids.
yeah, the nucleotides is what I was referring to.
What is this called?
Wait a minute, tyrosine, is that not an amino acid?
Yes, it is, but it's not part of the genetic code. You're thinking of C, G, A, and T?
Yeah.
Cytosine, guanine,
Right.
thymine,
Right.
and adenine.
Yes, yes.
Those are not amino acids, those are nucleotides, they're attached to the DNA backbone. Yeah.
They're not amino acids.
No, they're not.
No, you need 3 nucleotides to encode an amino acid.
Yeah.
And the code that translates between nucleotides and amino acids has been analyzed, and apparently it's the optimal code.
The one that we've got is the optimal code?
Yeah.
1 in a million. Well, that was it, you answered my question. Thank you, thank you. very much. Perfect, yes.
When we say the one that we have, you mean our human?
Yes,
human pathogen?
Well, I think all of nature has the same code.
Yeah.
Greg, I want to ask you a question. You're an engineer.
Oh, yeah.
Do you try to make your whatever you're building beautiful?
You asked me that question just now, and the answer was yes. And I think, for example, if you're a structural engineer, you could build a bridge which is purely functional. But if you're a really good structural engineer, you want to make a bridge that's beautiful as well. And I was just giving a reference to something arcane like software. It's possible, after you've written some really brilliant code, to sit back and admire it. And that's the aesthetic part of it. You wouldn't necessarily admire something that is just functional. So that's my answer.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
It has to do with the idea of us being co-creators, and that we are doing things that we're pretty much we would think are in God's domain. And I want to get into the whole idea of things like creating new life, genetic modifications. And I think of these ancient ideas of you know, Pandora's box and Nemesis. Maybe there are some things we shouldn't be attempting to be a creator of. I'm gonna toss that idea out.
Well, the problem is that we don't have the wisdom to create the right thing or to do it properly.
But isn't the artificial intelligence that we're having to deal with now, isn't that a cause for concern?
Yeah, that's probably another issue there too. We don't. It either can get out of control, the artificial intelligence, or it can fall into the wrong hands and be misused by governments to have more control over the population.
Yeah, and there's never been an invention that hasn't been misused. Like Nobel, when he invented dynamite, he didn't expect it to be used militarily, right?
Yeah,
One of the Canadian founders of AI is actually backing out by next week, retiring in order to speak against it. Because it falls up on the wrong hands, AI will fall on the wrong hands, then we're all done.
yeah.
So he's retiring or he's quitting Google job just to speak against it, against AI.
What's his name?
Oh, shucks, I just saw it.
Yeah, I read about that.
Hunter.
Well, I don't know how many of you have seen, are interested in science fiction and you watch the Terminator movies.
Yeah,
The Terminator is an AI that.
Yeah.
Decided that humans were not necessary and wanted to take over the world. Yeah,
The godfather of AI, Dr. Hinton,
Dr. Hinton.
No.
godfather of AI, leaves Google and warns of danger ahead. So he will leave Google just to speak against him. I mean AI, not Google.
Yeah. But
Just to add another dimension to artistry, if you talk to artists, painters, poets, they would say there's more to it than just that surface appearance of beauty, that art is a way of conveying spiritual things as well, like some things that are very deep that can only be expressed that way. So it's interesting to look at that.
Why is it spiritual? Is it because of the way that we react?
Well, some things are difficult to describe. But it's the artist's job to bring that out. Even looking at some of the Inuit art,
Yes.
it's what would you say about that? Sort of spiritual? The spiritual element to it?
Well, it falls on my eyes as being beautiful and unique, and then I associate it with the Inuit.
Yeah,
So immediately I associate. I don't know if that's
so it belongs.
bad, but I to answer the question, I appreciate the beauty of it.
So what is beauty?
yeah, Fuz didn't get into the,
Subjective, right?
Well, there are possible answers to that. What is beauty?
That's too big
Like
for me, I don't.
People come up with examples of beauty. Oh, well, that bridge is beautiful, or
Yes.
that sunset is beautiful, but those are examples. But when you try to give a dictionary definition of
Yes.
what is beauty, it gets pretty philosophical.
There's that old saying that beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
So, Chris, could you say that beauty is the beholder?
Say that? For me,
Chris, go ahead.
Go ahead, do you want to?
please go ahead, yeah.
Well, I was just saying that, okay, fine, if mankind has been on Earth for whatever, it is, who knows, 10, 20, 50,000 years, whatever. Do you think mankind has been doing a good job of stewarding the Earth and looking after it and conserving it?
No.
Very well questioned.
No, unfortunately not.
Not really?
No.
But I think, I believe it's meant to be that way, because there's.
Right?
I believe it's meant to be that way, because how can we reach end of times? Always transitioning to, we're all part of a story, right? God's story. But I love the question on the beauty, if I may go back to it. Well, if you define beauty, the way I understand it, it is, what do you call that? Subjective to the person who's analyzing beauty. The beauty that my standards of beauty may be different from his standards of beauty, or to another who's, the metal rock bands, and they make art that are when probably a Christian would see it, or like, this is so noisy, like all black and red, but for them it's beauty. So I think it depends on the one who analyzes it, interprets it.
but we never got, sorry, we never got into the conversation of the opposite of beauty. The
Oh,
ugliness, some, you know what I'm talking about, some art that is really not art, it's really.
Well, who's to say?
Who's to say?
Yeah, you're saying that
It's the same.
this is ugly and
It's the thing, isn't it?
Well, I don't know, pornography, then that's what the pornography.
that's not art.
Well, there you go, that's, to them it's art, that's
Yeah,
my
but no,
point.
you just said what it
Hey,
was. You said what it was.
Huh?
You just called it pornography.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, some people think that's art.
but in the context of biblical, it wouldn't.
Well,
So I
okay,
think the standards. would
Yeah,
be-
but when in the court of law, they don't go by that. I mean, you know,
that's the thing,
yeah,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
I
you know.
agree.
We
I
never,
agree.
we, you know, we have an appreciation of beauty because I think God lives in us, but there are some people who,
Go beyond.
their sense of beauty, I said, that's, yeah, that can't.
Yeah, there are differences, but it's the similarities, it's the things that tie us together, it's the things that actually communicate.
Mhm.
And when somebody creates something, you look at it and you go, I get it.
Mhm.
You know, I think that's the thing to dwell on, that's the thing.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we should focus on the physical beauty. There are many forms of beauty. There's inner beauty, there's beautiful words, there's beautiful souls, there's beautiful, you know, we think of beauty, we try to think beautiful.
Well, I think you said beautiful formings.
But I think it comes in so many shapes and forms, like we say. That was just a really most beautiful conversation, the most beautiful person in my eyes, of what I heard.
So is it an issue, is an issue of response then? Is it an issue of response?
I think so.
Yeah, it's another issue is the state of the artist, because if an artist is going through a depression, his art at that point is not really beautiful to most people,
Yes.
Yeah,
unless, you know, they're also depressed and they can relate
to that.
to that
Yeah.
person's type of art.
Doesn't that make it beautiful then?
In, yeah,
Somebody who's depressed can connect with somebody else that's depressed.
yeah.
Hey, Bruno, can I can't, my video can't be seen, but I want to chime in here. I want to say something. Can you give me an edge?
Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to agree with, well, I want to chime in on some of the comments that were made, but I think the greatest beholder of beauty is our creator in heaven, because in Revelations chapter 4, verse 11, it says that for all things are created by him, and for his pleasure they were and are created. And then if you go to Romans chapter 1, here, thank you for that. I'll give you the video here. Yeah, if you go to Romans chapter 1, verse 20, it says, for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are created, even his eternal power. Another translation says attributes and Godhead, so that they are without excuse and defense. So it seems that the creator, if you ask the purpose, what's the reason and purpose for aesthetic beauty that the creator has created? It's that it's the greatest evangelism witness in the universe, that everything is created for his pleasure and for his delight, for him primarily, but secondarily, it's the greatest witness. It's a cosmic witness and its universal outreach to every one of us, past, present, and future world, of his eternal glory, majesty, and attributes. So when God creates from a seed a beautiful orchid, we wonder at its beauty and its color. To add to the lady's point there about what's beautiful, it's not only beautiful things that are aesthetic, like visually our eyes behold beauty, it's our ears behold beauty. When you hear an orchestra, when you hear beautiful singing, our tongues behold beauty when you chomp into the beautiful fruit or you enjoy the Mandarin dinner. You know, when we touch each other, we behold the texture and the pleasure of hugging and embracing. These are like, we are co-enjoyers and co-delighters in what God himself delights and enjoys. Right?
Done.
And I think just to add to your point, Robert, part I think you meant to say and just forgot is that when we look at all these things, it points us to God. That it tells us a lot about who he is.
Yes, yes.
And my wife is incredible, like she loves flowers and she loves nature and stuff, and when the kids were growing up, she would often at the dinner table, kids would talk about animals or whatever, or she'd point to a flower and she'd say, so, you know, what do you feel when you look at that thing, flower, animal, whatever, and they would describe it and how they felt, and she says, and what does that tell you about God? And so they would say, oh, well, he's powerful, or oh, well, he's beautiful, or he's creative, or they come up with some response, right? And I think, you know, Robert's point about evangelism is so true that, you know, if you want to know what God is like, just look at what he made. And
Yes.
part of what I say to people is God is, he's, don't take this the wrong way, but he's crazy with some of the things that he's made. And that tells me he's extravagant, like he's made stuff that's just a complete waste. We're never gonna see it. We're never gonna see stuff that God made. Like they just discovered a new fish called a snail fish at the bottom of the trade shop off Japan, not the Marianas, another one. And it's like 33,000 feet down. They were able to film it, but no human will ever, has ever been there except for one or two people. So for the most part, stuff God makes, we don't even get to see, but when we do see it, we go, wow, that's crazy, you know?
Yeah. I want to just ask a question in regards to something that Buzz had mentioned about, he touched on it, but the idea of procreation and being attracted to one another based on our beauty and attractiveness. In creation, you see it in birds especially, that the beauty and attractiveness of each other, it inhibits the function of reproduction. They're attracted to one another, so they want to mate. And we obviously see that in humans too, that, most guys and gals, they want to find a beautiful husband or a wife or a handsome husband, right? So the idea of that is, Buzz didn't mention it, but inherent in beauty is this idea of procreation and the continuance of the species, which God says part of his commands in Genesis too is to be fruitful and multiply and to replenish the earth. Not only is that true in humans, but also true in creation and different species and birds and fish and animals too. Is there any comment of that anyone wants to bring up or mention, Bruno?
That's good.
Anybody?
No, I just agree with him that it's the same principle.
Yeah,
There's some.
I agree with you that
dances
it's
that
the same
birds do to attract their mate, right? Some of the things that species do to attract their mate, some of them are just insane. Like, they dance for 3 weeks just to get one mate. It's always the man that has to do the work.
Yeah.
Necessary.
That never changes.
I have a question, Bruno, you brought up this question of, do you think that we've taken very good care of this beautiful earth? And I was just watching Leonardo DiCaprio accept his Oscar for The Revenant, and he was talking about how man is destroying our earth. And all these species that Don talks about, they're just disappearing, every day. And my friend here was saying, well, this is supposed to be the course of nature that God has planned out. Well, if that's true, and Jenny and I, we were driving home from church yesterday, and she says, my wife was saying, the amount that we spend in the United States on a war, on Ukraine, on sending, even here in Canada, war stuff to Ukraine, we could have taken that money and solved all of our infrastructure, all of our poverty issues here in our country, and we spend it on military. And so the question I have is, why is God allowing us to take our beautiful earth to the end stage? I mean, once we're gone, yes, you all say that there's a new life, a new earth, but then we're done. If we're supposed to be here on earth in his image for his delight, once we're gone, then what? Like we are the pets. Once the pets are dead, where's his delight? You see my point?
well, see, the problem is when Adam and Eve decided to rebel against God, they decided to be in control of the whole themselves. And so God said, okay, you don't want my help. You go ahead, you live yourself the way you want and look and see what happens. And so this is the result of our the disobedience of Adam and Eve at the beginning, and God allowing them to show us, the consequences of living a life without God.
Yeah, that's the life of sin, right?
Yeah, but
I think just the one thing that concerns me about what you said, Chi, is that implied in your question is that mankind has the humankind will determine the fate of the planet, and that is not true. It's just not. God says he's in charge ultimately, and he'll decide when the end is the end. It won't be us. Now, your point is still valid, and that is that we're doing all kinds of things to the earth, but at the end of the day, what I don't like about those kinds of statements is that it implies that we're not doing anything good. And mankind has done some amazing things for the planet that would not have exist if we weren't these creators that were made in God's image. And many problems related to poverty, related to all kinds of other things have been solved by human beings. So I would contend that there's another side to the coin.
Yeah, and he did say the poor would always be with you. They were, God said the poor will always be with you. You know, it's the fallen nature of man. Man can't solve the problem. Even with good intentions, he can't solve the problem.
But there are compassionate people who do not understand why a God who is all-knowing would allow pain,
Yeah.
I know it's a question that we can't answer because it's above us, but I think that it's worthwhile, at least for me, it's worthwhile for me to give ear and an appreciation for persons who have that question and wonder, why does God allow
Suffering.
Yes,
Suffering.
right, and it's too big for me to answer. The only way that I can answer it is to say, all I can do is to say, try to live according to his precepts, right? And try to be right that way, because I don't know the answer, but I give value and virtues to the question.
If you go back a few months to one of our meetings, one of them is why God allows suffering, so watch
I
that.
missed it, I was away, I didn't.
No, but you can see it online.
You can see it online. I'll give it to you.
Okay.
Bruno,
Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
yeah, I can't help but interject regarding this comment about the war in Ukraine. Having two kids from Ukraine, I feel that what the NATO and the European Union are doing right now, it's a beautiful thing. It's a thing that needs to be done. And somebody said in the past, all that needs to, I forget the exact quote, but if good people don't do anything, bad will prevail. And I think this is such a case. It's just as if the Allies would not have resisted the Nazis. That would have been a bad thing. So the beautiful thing was to resist the Nazis. That was the one comment I wanted to make. I can't help myself. I know this is not about politics, so I'll leave it at that. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Right.
I just want to follow up on the idea that God admires what he has created. The flip side of that is God detests bad things which have been created, and usually those bad things have been created by man.
That's right.
And that also accounts for things like suffering. Most of the suffering kind of things were man-made things, not
Yes.
God-created things.
Excellent.
No, I think that idea is really key because, I think of the Israelites when they built the golden calf, the wrath of God that was unleashed on them. So, in the Christian tradition, God is a loving God. I believe in the Muslim tradition, it's more of the other way, that he's a punitive God. But there's both. He admires things that he created and detests some of the things we create.
Makes sense, yeah. Anything that we worship beyond him, yeah.
I just wanted to say that I think one of the things that we can do that we sometimes overlook when it comes to being co-workers with God is this notion of discipleship, that, Jesus' last command to us was never rescinded. And that command is that we should go and make disciples in his name.
Yes.
And every time we make a disciple, we are co-working with God, co-creating, perhaps you could use that term as well, but we're bringing a new life into being.
Oh,
And
praise God.
we don't do the work, we just work with God. And so we get to be partners with him. I like that term. And I think that this is probably, in my opinion anyway, the greatest thing of working with God as a partner that we can do, because if it isn't that, then why we're here. You know, we're not here just to walk around and look at God's beauty. That's part of it, but we're here to make disciples. We're here to introduce people to God and to Jesus and to see them come into relationship with him. That's why we exist. That's why RTB exists. It's why we do what we do, right? I hope it is.
Yeah,
And that's a tremendous responsibility. So all those buzzwords that Fuz used, I was sitting there going, yeah, this all applies to that whole notion of us being called to make disciples, that we have a responsibility to do it. We get to co-work with God and we are co-creators. We bring new life. All those things are part of discipleship. I just saw it all kind of click tonight. I mean,
and I think even in the New Testament, Paul uses the phrase, I know that we are partners
yes,
in the gospel.
that's right.
Bruno, I just want to address what that gentleman said. Maybe I misspoke. We have friends in the Ukraine. So I didn't really mean to think we shouldn't send help to the Ukraine. My daughter is violin teacher in Ukrainian. So, but I think all I meant was to say is that we just spend so much money on the military, creating wars when we could spend some money, you know, helping our own, you know, infrastructure, our poverty in our own country,
Yeah.
instead of starting wars. I didn't mean to offend the guy, you know, who has family. In
Yeah,
Would you
Chris,
agree
go
that-
ahead.
Would you agree that war is a form of vanity?
Where's the form of which?
Vanity. Well, it's part of it. But it's more than that. It's a form of greed too.
I think it's end of times.
Yeah.
Chris,
Revelation.
go ahead.
You know, one of the best examples in the world of this talk that we had this evening on beauty is of the birds of paradise of New Guinea. Not only do we find them stunningly beautiful, they're completely amazing, but the birds themselves find themselves beautiful. And that's why they keep on procreating with the most beautiful. And so that the colors and the shapes and all this, it's extreme. It's unbelievable. Because animals themselves are created with beauty, not only us, but it's an example of a bird species, a bunch of them, which have developed because of beauty alone.
Yeah. Sorry, Carolyn, did I cut you off? Did you want to say something? Okay.
Oh, but well, just to connect with what he said, I absolutely agree with that, and it's all part of, because we're all under God. So for me, the beauty, like for production for the birds, this is all under God's design because it has to be sustained until he comes back. But then for all the things that cause sins and war or this and that, I believe that's the sin of man. That's the fall of man, really. Because if you use power for destruction, then that's absolutely the opposite of the presence of God. The opposite of the absence of light is darkness, and the absence of love is hate. So that falls on the absence of God himself.
Well, yeah, if you're destroying, you're not creating.
Yes.
In the back, Gloria.
I think what we miss is that we don't take the time to smell the roses. We don't take the time, and I find it as, you know, as you grow and as times change and as you mature, you know, then if you take that time, you sort of just sense that there is so much beauty that you do miss, that you do not see, and you don't share.
Yes.
And it's all around us, but it just depends on what's going on personally. So a lot of it's missed.
Bruno, just to comment about some of the things we've mentioned already about co-creation. I was thinking in contrast to creation itself, Acts chapter 17, verse 29, when Paul is on Romans Hill in the Acropolis giving his discourse, he says, for as much then as we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think of ourselves, not to think of that the Godhead is like unto gold or silver or stone, graven by art and made and man's device, right? So it's like we as human beings created in God's image and likeness naturally want to co-create and co-produce, like make things, but we end up making them of our own graven, our own hands and our own workmanship. And evidently we want to worship that which we've created. And I think this is what you have that is mentioned in the children of Israel. And I guess the idea of worshiping of self, worshiping of other people, worshiping of idols. We are born worshipers. And I think when you see beauty, the idea is to worship it, to love it, to admire it, to adore it. And I guess the essence of beauty is really God himself. And in Christ too, is in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. He is the most beautiful of all, the creator himself. And worshiping and serving our creator is our highest calling and our highest good. And I think what our brother Don has mentioned is a beautiful contrast and parallel, that as we disciple one another and lead each other into relationship with Christ, into his love and his beauty and his majesty, then we are doing it's our highest good and highest calling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris?
You know, I think we sort of make a mistake here. We think God is completely in control of this earth, but he said himself that the God of this earth is Satan. And Satan doesn't like anything that God represents. So God represents beauty. Satan represents ugliness and war and pestilence. And so why we see so much ugliness around and wars is that this world is reporting to Satan right now, and he's trying to destroy it. So it's not God's fault. It's that, you know, evil has had a chance to take hold.
Yeah, because, well, that's one of the consequences of rejecting God, you know, having rejected God, is that you then give control to Satan.
Right.
Satan himself is supposed to be beautiful.
Yeah,
So that should show you that it's not all about the surface and how things look from the surface. That we are capable in our appreciation to look past the surface and still see beauty.
It's like a war, good and evil.
right?
Good and evil, a war of
Yeah.
good and evil, because we exist too and we are of gods. We're Christians.
Yeah, I'd like to say that we've got close friends that are Muslims and all the rest, and I was asking this fellow what he thought about this, and he said, well, you know, Gabriel came to Muhammad and, you know, whatever, told him this and dictated this and that and all the rest, and I thought to myself, yeah, probably Gabriel was very, very beautiful, but it was probably Satan who was lying and saying, well, I'm Gabriel, and then dictated all this stuff to the Muslims about, you know, you can kill Christians and Jews and all the rest. It's a very hateful book, the Quran. I didn't say that to him because he was worshiping, you know, everything that Muhammad did, you know, praise Muhammad and all this. And I thought to myself, yeah, he's a liar. That's why he said he was Gabriel, but he wasn't. Anyway, that's what I think happened.
The strongest who can back it up,
What's that?
the strongest who can back it up, the one we are saying about the faith, is Nabil Qureshi. So he's a Muslim and became a Christian apologist, yes.
So what he said too,
That he said, yes, so he was a Christian missionary and he was studying medicine, and then in the United States, and his parents were missionaries of the Muslim faith. And then he began studying the history of Christianity and became an apologist of born again Christianity, following Jesus Christ and speaking about Jesus. And he said one of the things when he was finding something to comfort him in the Quran, he couldn't find it. But then God walked him through in Mark, and he was, you know, he felt the love of God and said, there's nothing good and loving of who I worship. And then I saw God in this Bible. And so Jesus love.
Yeah, he's not with us anymore, is he?
Yeah, he passed away cancer.
Yeah, he had cancer.
35 years
He
old.
wrote a nice books. He was great.
And then even Joseph Smith, who founded Mormon, he said, you know, he met an angel or somebody,
Same
but that
thing.
was also probably Satan.
Yeah.
Because there's apparently some similarity between Islam and the Mormon religion.
right,
Yeah.
I agree.
You really gotta pray, eh? Gotta pray.
I just wanted to follow on what you said, Bruno, about when you reject God, that you're opening yourself up to Satan.
Yeah.
The flip side of that is what St. Paul said, is to defend yourself against Satan. You have to put on the armor of God. And you do that through prayer and contemplation of scripture, etc. So that's our defense against that happening.
Yeah.
But we don't do that in our society nowadays. It's disappearing. There's a lot of apostasy happening.
Yeah.
I'd like to chime in there, Bruno.
Go ahead.
Okay, the Bible says that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. Now, we're getting into areas in science and that where it's like going into a dark cave without a flashlight. You're stumbling around, you could get hurt, you could get killed. And when I look at this, all this with AI, there's no structure of truth. I mean, assumptions, fabrications, or theories. If you have no foundation of truth, it's all over the place. No wonder it's no wonder it's such a mess. I was just looking at Chat GPT. You can put a joke in and ask it to give you a joke about a Christian, but it will not respond to you putting a joke in about a Muslim. So the system is already biased. The computer's already putting patterning the Christians to be like a lower form already. I mean, it's and this is brings up the point of when you talk about engineering design, there's structure, how things are wonderfully and designed and built, and with man looking to be God, he's never going to be God. But what he will do, he can unleash those inner things, that those Pandora boxes, and that's what will get us into real trouble. And I see our society quickly heading that direction.
Quickly,
Right.
very quickly.
See, one thing about AI, I read an article by someone, and he says it has no morality.
Yeah,
It's only reacting the same way, all people online react. So it's just copying whatever it found online, and people get into arguments, they start calling each other names. And so if you keep on persisting with questions, it'll start to call you names, it'll start threatening you. And Microsoft had to put a limit on the number of questions you can ask it, because otherwise it will get to that stage where it starts retaliating. So this guy that wrote the article said the only way to solve this is to put morality into the line so that it makes right and wrong decisions. But then,
well,
no one's done that
morality is
yet.
destruction. It's destruction. No morality. Complete destruction.
Hopefully somebody in the future is designing a Terminators and in fact destroy ChatGPT.
And Isaac Asimov, who is a science fiction writer, who wrote these I, Robot series.
Yeah,
He created the 3 laws, and then he added a 4th one to prevent this from happening. But nobody has put those 3 laws into being a foundation of the AI. And they debate it, but it's not been done, because some of them are pretty hard. One of the laws is you can't do anything. If a human tells you to do something and it's going to hurt someone else, you can't do it. But you have to have the think smart enough to realize that what it's going to do is going to hurt somebody.
yeah.
For now, we're okay, but it's more of this AI for the future of the younger ones. Because our batch is okay, but the younger ones, I don't know what world they're gonna wake up to it. It's scary. All we can do is to pray and trust in the Lord for them.
So Bruno, is there a particular company or a series of company that's leading the charge towards AI? Like who is the?
There's about 4 or 5 companies out there doing it.
And like who? Do you know?
Well, it's
Google,
Google,
Microsoft.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. and
Oh, Musk, yeah.
yeah, but Musk, he started the company that did the Chat GPT, and then he saw it was going the wrong way, he got out of it. And now he's starting another one to try to counter what they're doing.
Yeah, we still may have.
Oh,
So, yeah.
That raises an interesting point that just as a software developer can create code, a virus, if you will, to go and take down some functional software or system elsewhere, it could theoretically be possible for somebody to create an AI system to infect ChatGPT and turn it a certain way. And thereby control or direct what chat GPT that, it's out.
I think that the scary part of AI is not so much that it can draw on all the sources, because that Google kind of does that already, right? To your point. It's the concept of machine learning. So machine learning is what's really scary, is that machines are capable of learning now without any software at all, without any programming whatsoever. They're learning. And that's the, you know, go back to your original reference, you know, that's the whole premise of the Terminator movies, is that the machine became self-aware and then started to, you know, create a war against, started to create a war against humans, which they perceived as a threat. This is not a completely far-fetched, you know, concept.
Yeah.
It's actually happening in our time. Not that they're gonna attack us,
But I think the more likely thing is that governments will start to use it, you know, for their own purposes.
oh, yeah. Well, look at just your Google, you know, you do your Google searches and all of a sudden you see adverts for all kinds of stuff that you were looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just simple, you know, tracking software, but. You know, we have a member of our chapter here, John Asbury, some of you know him, and he's not an expert, but he knows an awful lot about machine learning. Which was here.
Machine learning is being taught in most programs now in engineering, like my daughter's at Waterloo, and they have courses in machine learning. And it's, I don't think it's something that you can stop. The question becomes, like what you were saying about the iRobot movie, why can't they put those laws into? Why are they not doing that?
Yeah.
Like I thought, didn't Elon Musk come on YouTube saying he's worried about AI?
Oh, of course.
So why?
He's not the only one that's worried about it.
But then you said just now that he's one of the progenitors of AI. So
No,
which
but
is-
back
where
then,
is that?
about 6 or 7 years ago, he got out of the company because it was out of his control. He couldn't control which way it's going.
He's doing it or he's against it? I don't
He's
get it.
against it
Oh,
still.
okay.
And so he's trying to start another company to try to make a better AI that doesn't have these problems.
He has a good heart then.
Because, you know, you write a software to try to help people get things done faster, right?
Mhm.
But you know, that's the intention, but sometimes you lose control or you get the wrong people that are in charge of the company, just want to make money or you don't care.
But isn't that the point I was trying to make earlier, is that once the military gets control of something like this, then it just.
Well, then you make weapons like, you know, like the Skynet that run, you know, robots that instead of sending soldiers out, you send robots out to fight the war.
Or just even penetrating to your bank accounts and done. All records gone, that's it. That's the one can be
Say that.
strongest and we're done.
I think that it affects the educational system, having, you know, it gives, you kind of wonder what, effect it's gonna have. You know, it's difficult to monitor,
Yes.
when it's used by students and whatnot.
Oh.
How to decipher what the truth is from what they're copying from
Yeah.
using it.
They actually created a system. I don't know if it's completed or they're still pushing completing it, but the schools will use it to define whether you copied it from AI or if it's your own.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I don't know. It's
It gives educators more difficulty with this type of resource that students can turn to.
saddest part is it will create lazy students. For the young ones, for us, we're okay.
So then what happens? You know, how much are they learning? Wow.
But you know, you can be afraid of the future, or you can realize that God is still in control. So God will let people go do things on their own, and at a certain point, He will stop. Stop it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna make the same comment. I could leave here tonight thinking that all is lost. But just recently, I got a vaccination to prevent a certain disease to where I was going. And I was all concerned, and the doctor turned to me and said, look, Rudy, God is still in control. So just go and do your thing.
Yeah.
After tonight. Still have that perspective, knowing that all these things, we're not just throwing out all the things we've talked about. But I don't think we need to be alarmed or scared, but we still have to be proactive.
Yes.
You know,
At the end of the day,
And in the book of Revelation, you know, God already told us what's gonna happen, and in the end, he wins.
He wins, yeah. That's our victory, a victory.
You know, there will,
Let
Yeah.
me say, Fuz's book, Humans 2.0, he touches on a lot of these topics in this book, if you're interested. Particularly the notion that we can enhance human beings with technology. We already have that. And some of those enhancements are great, but
Yes.
there is a moral and ethical question that does start to happen, and that is, well, how far should we go?
Yes.
You know, nobody in this room would probably object to a hearing aid. That is a enhancement to human beings, but we start taking all kinds of body parts off and replacing them with robot parts, and then everybody starts to have an objection.
Yes.
So, yeah, Homer's holding up another book. Homer,
What
do
is
you want
that?
to speak?
yeah.
The age of
AI, yeah.
AI. Oh,
Unmute yourself, right, Lamar?
you're
You're
on mute.
Oh,
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. The kids were around, so it's called The Age of AI. Sorry, it doesn't show up very well. By Jason Thacker. It was it's been promoted by Reasons to Believe, and it's obviously very applicable to the subject, and it's very balanced, you know, because as the previous gentleman mentioned, you know, AI has its goods and its bad sides. So we need to try to keep an open mind, but also have a little caution as well, right? One of the concerns about machine learning is that because of the way the training happens, a lot of the time, we are not sure of how the AI comes up with an answer. So it may come up with the right answer most of the time, but we don't know how that answer came about. So there are some funny examples, like this AI machine learning was trained to recognize dogs versus huskies, and it was doing it very well with the training data, and they put it out in the field, and all of a sudden it was making all kinds of errors. And what it turned out, when they investigated all the training data, they had the huskies on the snow. So all it was looking was for a light background behind this animal. And it detected a husky because there was a light. So that's the kind of thing. We don't necessarily know. It's just associating things together. And that's how the machine language develops its model. And then if the training data is not very, very carefully chosen, it can make some very bad mistakes. But all that to say, it's tricky. Anyways, that's my comment.
Thank you.
going full circle here, we started out this meeting today talking about God as an artist. Do we see God as an artist in AI and all that kind of thing? Do we see beauty in it?
That's a beautiful question.
Whatever.
Well, we can see beauty in, you know, our own mind, beauty in how another person maybe communicates, or something they create. So when you create something, it's the mind that's behind it, right?
Or do we see only bad? Do we see the negative?
Can I just
At
answer
the
that
moment,
question?
probably there is a lot of focus on the negative, but you know,
It's
the intention of creating AI was to help to do some good in the long run.
I feel to answer our brother's question, you know, the Lord loves righteousness, Hebrews chapter 1. The Lord loves righteousness. He hates unrighteousness and unjustness. And I think as we as designers and engineers and architects and software development, if we start designing in morality and start designing in ethics and also just and equity and equitableness in our designs, then we will represent our creator in that, and therefore we're good stewards of our designs. Also, I wanted to just comment or just say this point, that ask the question, what does the creator love in terms of beauty? What is the Lord love in terms of beauty? And when I've looked at it, it's, the Lord loves holiness. He loves purity of heart. And we as believers and human beings in an age of pornography and pornea and just filth and just all over the place, the Lord loves purity of heart. He loves purity and wholeness and healthiness of heart and mind and soul. So there is this, as our sister mentioned, there's a beautiness of the soul and righteousness that the Lord loves too. That's their inward beauties, as well as His word, the word of God, which is beautiful.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're gonna end it here. It's almost 9 o'clock. If you have any more questions or comments, you can always email me. And then we have that you probably are not aware, but there's a network of how many apologists now at RTB done?
Globally?
Yeah,
Hundreds.
100. So if we don't know the answer, we can ask the apologist network and somebody will come up with, will find the answer. So thank you for coming, and we'll see you all next month.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Oh, that's right.